Hello, my name is Maya, and I'm 25 years old. My day job in Seattle is developing software. As far as I can tell, it's completely different from my hometown. The first step on the long and winding road to independence was breaking free from my mother's influence. You must know my background in order to comprehend my current situation. My mother, Eleanor, was a tyrant, and I spent my childhood in a little village close to Portland, where we lived in constant fear of her. I had a very extraordinary childhood. My mother has been my rock and guide in life for as long as I can remember. Having sleepovers with friends was out of the question, and there was zero tolerance for defiance. There would be serious consequences if I did something that Mom thought was incorrect. At other times, it was the inability to enjoy meals that I'd come to look forward to. As a child, I could only dream of the independence that other children seemed to have. My mother was constantly meddling, leading me in the ways she believed were best, regardless of how well I did in school. I didn't get a say in whatever college she recommended for me. She insisted it was the right choice for my future. Despite my desires to attend a large university, she was adamant on attending a more intimate institution near our home. It seemed as if she was hell-bent on controlling me to the last possible second. But I first felt a glimmer of independence in college. After graduating, I took advantage of the opportunity to relocate to Seattle, and I was able to make certain decisions independently. I finally felt like I was living my life on my own terms after landing a position at a renowned software business. A building close to the city center had a lovely flat that I was able to secure. Even though it was on the smaller side, it seemed like a stronghold of autonomy because it was mine. The transition to Seattle life was thrilling. I took great pleasure in the little things, making my own schedule, walking to work, and grocery shopping. During the first 3 months, everything seemed great, but then I began to notice subtle things that didn't add up. Nothing specific, but I was worried by the strange phone calls and messages. I disregarded it, attributing it to the paranoia that stemmed from my history of being overly controlled. Afterwards, Mr. Carter, a neighbor, came knocking on my door one night. A graphic designer, he's a little older than me, yet he has a gentle spirit and a trim frame. "Excuse me, could you give me a moment to talk?" he pleaded, his voice betraying his uneasiness. "Sure, Mr. Carter, what's up?" I responded, attempting to conceal my anxiety. He appeared anxious. "Someone was behaving suspiciously near your flat, and I just saw it. They could be attempting to get entry, so I thought you might want to know." It was as if my heart were rapidly beating. My stomach dropped at the mere idea of an intruder, even if I hadn't personally detected anything out of the ordinary. "Do you mean it? I mean, it might be a random passerby." "Personally, I'm certain." "I felt you should look into it," he stated with conviction. Unlocking my apartment door and stepping inside set my thoughts racing. Everything seemed in place, but my anxiety was through the roof. Just as I was about to relax, I saw something out of the corner of my eye. A purse that definitely wasn't mine. It was a sleek designer piece, and it looked out of place. I was about to call the police when I noticed a note inside the purse. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. It was a message from my mother. "I'm sorry, Maya. I had to come. I've been watching you. I needed to know if you were okay." My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't believe it. My mother, Eleanor, was in my apartment. I felt a surge of anger and betrayal. How had she found me? The purse had been a gift from her, one of many over the years. I hadn't thought much of it, but now I realized it had a hidden tracking device. She'd been monitoring my every move. I turned to Mr. Carter, who had followed me into the apartment. "My mother, she's been tracking me. She must have put a device in this purse. I can't believe she'd invade my privacy like this." Mr. Carter's face was filled with sympathy. I'm so sorry, Maya. That's a huge invasion of privacy. You don't deserve that. I need to confront her, I said, my voice shaking. She has no right to do this. I knew I had to act fast. The next steps were crucial. This was more than just a breach of trust. It was the moment I had to decide if I would let my mother's control continue or if I would take a stand for my own life. As I made plans to confront her, a mixture of fear and determination filled me. I knew that facing her would be painful, but it was a necessary step in breaking free from her shadow. The freedom I had so eagerly embraced in Seattle now seemed to be at risk. I needed to take control of my life once and for all. The discovery of my mother's hidden tracking device left me reeling. I couldn't believe Eleanor had crossed such a line. My life in Seattle was supposed to be my escape, my chance to breathe free away from her overbearing control. But her presence was a chilling reminder that I was still tied to her. The next day, I took a deep breath and made my way to the address listed for her. She was staying in a small, run-down apartment not far from where I had grown up. It wasn't luxurious, but it was enough for her. As I walked up to her door, my heart pounded. I knocked, and after a long moment, she opened it. "Maya," she said, her voice betraying a mix of surprise and guilt. "I wasn't expecting you." I stepped inside, my anger barely contained. "You weren't expecting me. You've been tracking me with a hidden device, and you're surprised." Her face reddened. "I just wanted to make sure you were safe. I didn't mean to invade my privacy." I cut her off, my voice shaking. "You've been following my every move. Mom, that's not just about safety. It's control." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears, but her defensive stance remained. "I've done it all for you. I was only trying to keep you close, to help you." "Help me," I nearly shouted. "By suffocating me, by deciding everything for me. I'm 25, Mom. I'm an adult. I need to live my own life." Her tears spilled over. "I'm sorry, Maya. I didn't know how to let go. I've made mistakes, but I didn't know how to fix them." I stared at her, feeling a mix of pity and frustration. "You're not just apologizing for tracking me. You need to understand how deep your control has gone." It was then that she revealed something I hadn't expected. "I've been struggling financially. I wanted to ask you for help, but I didn't know how." The confession hit me like a punch to the gut. "You were going to ask me for money after spying on me?" Eleanor nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been in debt, spending more than I should have. I thought maybe if I kept an eye on you, I could find a way to fix things." I felt a cold rage building inside me. "You've been spying on me to figure out how to get money from me? That's despicable. You've manipulated and controlled me for years, and now you want to use your intrusion to solve your problems." She tried to reach out to me, her hands trembling. "Maya, please. I didn't mean for things to get this way. I'm sorry." Her words felt hollow. "I can't do this anymore, Mom. I can't keep letting you control my life, even from a distance." Leaving her apartment, I was overwhelmed with a mixture of sadness and determination. I realized that the only way to reclaim my life was to sever all ties with her. It wasn't just about the tracking device or the money. It was about breaking free from years of emotional manipulation. Back at my apartment, I immediately started making changes. I got a new phone and set up additional security measures to prevent any more breaches of my privacy. I began looking for a new place to live, one that would be as far from her as possible. I also contacted a lawyer to begin the legal process of separating my family register from her. Each step was filled with a mix of relief and heartache. I had been so desperate for freedom, but now that it was within my grasp, the cost was more than I had anticipated. It wasn't just about moving on from my mother's control. It was about rebuilding my sense of self and autonomy. As I started packing up my things and preparing for the move, Mr. Carter was a surprising source of support. He offered to help with the logistics and provided a listening ear during the tough days. We spent more time together, and his kindness became a small comfort amidst the chaos. But the battle wasn't over. The more I learned about the extent of my mother's manipulation, the more I realized how deep her influence had run. Her actions had not only impacted my personal life, but also the way I viewed relationships and trust. The confrontation with Eleanor was only the beginning. I was about to embark on a journey of self-discovery and healing. While it was daunting, it was also necessary. The struggle for my independence had only just begun, and I knew that the road ahead would be challenging. The days following my confrontation with Eleanor were a blur of activity and emotions. I moved into a new apartment far from the small town near Portland where I had grown up. My new place was a fresh start, a place where I could finally feel like I had control over my own life. But even as I settled into my new surroundings, the weight of everything that had happened still lingered. The new apartment was modern, with big windows that let in lots of light. It was different from the cramped spaces I had lived in before, and I felt a strange mix of excitement and apprehension. The unpacking process was therapeutic, giving me a chance to reflect on how far I had come. But as I went through my belongings, I was reminded of the way Eleanor had intruded into every corner of my life. The legal separation from my mother was a significant step. It was both freeing and painful, knowing that this was the final cut in our complicated relationship. The lawyer assured me that it was a standard procedure, but it felt like a definitive end to a chapter I had struggled to close for years. During this time, Mr. Carter was a constant presence. He had been incredibly supportive, helping me with the move and offering a shoulder to lean on. We'd spend evenings talking about everything and nothing, his calm demeanor providing a welcome contrast to the chaos I had been through. Our conversations were a reminder that not everyone in my life was trying to control me. One evening, as we sat in my new apartment, Mr. Carter broached a topic I had been avoiding. "You've been through a lot lately," he said gently. "How are you holding up?" I looked around the room, my gaze landing on the empty spaces where my old life used to be. "It's been a whirlwind. I feel like I'm finally starting to breathe again, but it's also hard to let go of everything that happened." He nodded, understanding in his eyes. "It's a lot to process, but you're doing really well. This new place, the changes, you're taking control of your life." I appreciated his words. It was a relief to talk to someone who wasn't trying to manipulate me or control my decisions. Mr. Carter's support was more than I had expected, and it helped me see that there could be a positive side to all this upheaval. As weeks passed, I began to establish a routine in my new apartment. I started working on personal projects I had neglected for years, things that made me happy and allowed me to express myself. I also began to slowly reconnect with friends I had lost touch with, finding comfort in their support and understanding. Despite these positive steps, I couldn't completely escape the shadow of my past. I would occasionally receive messages from Eleanor, pleading for forgiveness or asking for updates on my life. Each time I felt a pang of guilt, but knew that responding would only drag me back into the turmoil I had tried so hard to escape. One day, as I was preparing dinner, Mr. Carter came over to help. We were talking about my new job when he suddenly asked, "Do you ever think about what's next for you beyond just getting away from everything?" I paused, considering his question. "I'm still figuring that out. I've been so focused on just getting away from my mother and her control that I haven't really thought about what I want my life to look like now." He smiled gently. "It might be worth thinking about what you want for yourself, not just what you want to escape from. You've made such a big step. What's your vision for your future?" His words struck a chord with me. I realized that while I had been focused on escaping my past, I hadn't spent much time considering what I wanted moving forward. The idea of creating a future based on my own desires was both exhilarating and daunting. That evening, as I sat alone in my new apartment, I began to dream about the future. I thought about the kind of life I wanted to build, not just the absence of my mother's influence, but a positive direction for myself. It was a new kind of freedom, one that came with its own set of challenges, but also with the promise of growth and self-discovery. I was starting to understand that reclaiming my life meant more than just breaking away from my mother's control. It was about building something new and meaningful for myself. While the journey was far from over, I felt a sense of hope and possibility that I hadn't felt in years. As the weeks turned into months, I started to feel a cautious optimism. My new apartment was starting to feel like home, and my routine was finally settling into place. I had been focusing on personal growth and rebuilding connections, but there was still one thing left unsettled: the final confrontation with Eleanor. One afternoon, as I was enjoying a quiet moment with a cup of coffee, I received another message from Eleanor. It was similar to the others, pleas for reconciliation and hints about her financial troubles. I stared at the message, a mixture of anger and sadness bubbling up inside me. It was clear she was still trying to reach out, but I had made up my mind. I couldn't let her back into my life. Mr. Carter had become more than just a supportive neighbor. He was now a true friend. Our conversations had become a regular part of my life, and I found myself opening up to him in ways I hadn't thought possible. One evening, while we were cooking dinner together in my apartment, I decided it was time to share my final thoughts about my mother. "I got another message from Eleanor today," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "She's still reaching out, asking for money, and saying she's sorry. I don't know what to do." Mr. Carter looked up from the stove, concern etched on his face. "You've already done so much to protect yourself. Maybe it's time to consider what's best for your own well-being." I nodded, feeling a mix of relief and apprehension. "I've been thinking about that. I know I need to let go completely, but it's hard to ignore that part of me that still feels responsible." He gently placed a hand on my shoulder. "It's natural to feel that way. But remember, you've done everything you could. Sometimes letting go is the hardest but most necessary step." The next day, I made a decision. I drafted a final letter to Eleanor, laying out my boundaries clearly. I stated that I would no longer respond to her messages and that any attempts to contact me would be ignored. It was a firm but respectful goodbye, and I hoped it would provide the closure I needed. As I sealed the envelope, I felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. It was a formal end to a turbulent chapter of my life, but it was also a declaration of my intent to move forward without the weight of the past dragging me down. A few days later, I had another heart-to-heart with Mr. Carter. We were sitting in the park, enjoying the crisp autumn air. He was quietly observing the changing leaves when he turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "You've been through so much, Maya. I'm really proud of how far you've come. But I've also noticed something. There's a light in you now that wasn't there before. You seem more at peace." I looked at him, feeling a warmth I hadn't felt in a long time. "Thank you. It's been a journey, but I think I'm starting to find my way. My attention is shifting from what I'm trying to avoid to what I actually desire." Mr. Carter's eyes betrayed his sincere friendliness as he grinned. "It's great to see you like this, and I'm here for you. Whatever you need." Even after we said our goodbyes, the conversation continued to haunt me. A fresh wind of optimism and resolve swept over me. I was starting to see a future based on my own hopes and ambitions, which was a first in a long time. Reflecting on the adjustments I had made as the year drew to a close was important to me. Even though I was far from finished, my background and my mother's influence no longer defined who I was. I was becoming more capable of standing on my own 2 feet and welcoming the future with open arms. I reflected on my life's experiences one night as I gazed out my apartment window at the city lights. Knowing that I had survived the ordeal with more strength than before was a strange mixture of pride and relief. The future was still cloudy, but fresh starts were on the horizon. Ultimately, it wasn't merely about escaping my mother's grip. It was about forging my own unique journey and mustering the bravery to embrace it. Looking ahead to whatever the future brought, I felt at ease knowing that I had finally regained control